And we continue with our interviews with the Beatles with George Harrison, 1979. Oh yeah, and John had taken to, this meditational practice he had started doing. It was very, very weird. He would eat a tin of peaches while sewing shut a stuffed boar's ass. You know, like a wild boar. He would get just their asses. I don't know what they did with the rest of the poor unfortunate animal. But, you know, their asses were sent to John. Ringo Starr, 1974. Oh yeah, I remember John with the boar's asses. And he had to have that tin of peaches. There was something spiritual in it. You know what we figured years later was that when John had gone up in the helicopter with the Maharishi, that's what the Maharishi told John to do. I can't say for sure that he started doing it exactly right after the Maharishi, but many of us in the know had suspected that but that's what they told John. Paul McCartney, 1983. Oh yeah, well, you know, when John started doing something ritualistically and habitually, it would be noticeable. You know, he'd be very grand about it. You know, he'd be very ostentatious. You know, in his spiritual let's call it spiritual peacocking, let's call it. And I did say that. I said, John, you know, one time he came in the room, you know, with all the Indian garb on. You know, I said, boopy boopy boo, hey, here comes John. The Maharishi has returned. You know, I was just joking. I was just not even trying to get a rise out of him. But John took the pipe. That's the only time it really ever came to blows between me and John. Ringo Starr, 1980. Oh yeah, so, well, you know, John had come walking in his Indian garb, and Paul saw him and said, you know, something like, the Maharishi returns, and sort of a mocking of John's entire belief system and structure. And, well, John went over and just a haymaker on the side of Paul's face. Just trashed him. It was like he was hell-bent for leather. And then Paul comes back with a left hook straight out of Joe Louis. And they start street fighting right there in the studio. Bloody dreadful street fighting. I don't know where they got the bloody hubcaps. I don't know where those hubcaps came from. But they started hitting each other with hubcaps. Of course, hubcaps in those days were very big and dangerous. I'm not saying today's hubcaps are any nicer or lighter or less. I'm just saying that in those days. George Harrison, 1989. Oh, they were throwing things at each other. Oh yes, they had hubcaps in the studio. They were street fighting. It's almost as if the fight was planned. And throwing sewer grates at one another and breaking bones, and oh, it was vicious. And Ringo was so stoned off of his gold that he's over there in the corner just, he's laughing, you know, his shoulders are shaking up and down. I said, Ringo, can we stop them? He said, no. You know how Ringo talks at low register. He says, no, why would I stop something that I can't pay $1 million to see any other time? And I just started pissing. Literally, I started urinating down the side of me trousers because of what Ringo had said, and because we were both stoned at the time. And John and Paul are over there just bruising and cutting each other. They got to one point where there was a switchblade fight. I didn't know that Paul carried a switchblade. I thought maybe John did. You know, that was John for you.
But I never thought Paul had a switchblade. I mean, it's just... when you see these guys that you've come to know and love, and they're fighting like the Bowery Boys or something. They're just fighting like old 30s movies where everybody, you know, starts fighting in the bar all at once. That's how Paul and John, and then after about a straight 15 minutes of this, it just stopped. And they started laughing.
The first one to piss was Paul, this time. Usually it was John, was the first one to piss when they'd laugh. No, this time it was Paul, and Paul was wearing tan trousers. Tan sort of mohair trousers, you know. The piss just pulled up and dripped down his leg. And then, of course, John saw it, and oh boy, John started pissing and shitting and throwing up. It was, you know, you never seen anything like it. Oh yeah, well, John had given me quite a bad beating. You know, John was a tough kid, you know. He was from Liverpool. I mean, just like all of us, he was, you know, used to having to defend himself. You know, and he could. And when we fought that day over me calling him the Maharishi, which I should probably have not have said in retrospect, but you're young, you're stupid, you do things like that, you know. And John took it very seriously and put a whooping, as they say in the States, put a whooping, opened up a can of whoop-ass on me. There's a friend of mine from Kentucky says that. Open up a can of whoop-ass, he says. Well, John opened up a whole case of whoop-ass on me that day. John Lennon, 1975.
Oh, well, I guess I showed Paul what was what that day. I'll never forget. All I was trying to do was walk around wearing some Indian garb so I could feel more like I was back in India, where I felt so many spiritual awakenings happening one day after the next, happening, so I wanted to put myself in that atmosphere again. I just wanted to feel it again. And Paul, in his typical style, says, "Oh, here comes the Maharishi." I said, "He's fucking not going to say that to me. He's not going to say that to me now." I walked over there. Haymaker. I slobbed him. I slobbed him like a mop. I said, "Mop on him." Oh yes, so it was amazing. I mean, you know, George and I were sitting there amusing ourselves, not only with a joint of some amazing sensibilia, tell you about that later, but we were amusing ourselves by using childhood fighting expressions from Delaware. You know, the state, United States, East Coast, Delaware, you know. So like when Paul would get a good left hook in on John, you know, I would say, "He said mop." And then George got up and started reenacting what had just happened 1 second earlier, and said, he said like this, you know, because that's what stupid dumb kids in Delaware say. Paul McCartney. Oh yeah, we heard them saying strange things while we were fighting, but John just wailed on me for a long time, like 25, 30 minutes, just one after the other, and I was, you know, we were both using fists and feet and just gouging, and oh, I think it's a miracle that
Paul never got... I'm Paul, yeah. Sometimes we call each other by our own names. Sometimes I think it's a miracle that John never had a baby after that. Oh, yeah. How did John have that baby after getting kicked in the dick by Paul that day? Oh, Paul repeatedly. Paul had him down and said, "You should never reproduce, you son of a bitch and devil bastard." Oh, Paul can curse at people when he wants to. Oh, he says, you unbelievably sick, deranged, devilish bastard son of a bitch, I hope you never procreate. And he's kicking him in the balls. I'll crush your baby makers, he's saying. I'll crush your baby makers. And, the whole time, John's just laughing. Because John had amazing pain response. You know, it didn't bother John. Of course, I think his nuts did get a bit flatter that day. Oh, yeah. I remember Paul had John down there for about, 30 seconds. It was a while, you know. And he said, "I'll kick you in your baby makers. You'll never have kids. You should never procreate. You're a bad seed." And he's calling them all these bad, awful names. And then John grabs Paul by the leg and trips him and pulls him down. And just as Paul's torso is falling down from being tripped, John reaches out and thunder punches Paul's taint. Just thunder punches it. And Paul doubles up in the strangest way. If you've ever seen somebody punched in the taint, you'll understand the way they double up. It's not like being punched anywhere else. Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah. John had got a grip of Paul's foot or something, pulled his leg out, and Paul comes tumbling down, and just as he does, John thunderclap punches him right in the taint, and Paul just was in so much pain. When Paul got up and started fighting some more, but now you notice Paul had a gait. You know, he's standing with his legs apart as if he's trying not to hurt his freshly punched taint, which had just been punched 10 seconds earlier. His taint hadn't even been left alone that long. It was still freshly punched. And he's just walking around with a freshly punched taint. John Lennon, 1973. Well, yeah, Paul did have me down there for a while, but I finally got a hold of his fucking foot, and I pulled him down and thunder punched his taint on his way down. It had both the thrust of my arm coming up and the weight of him coming down after I pulled him down, and he didn't like that. Well, he stood up, you know, spreading his legs like a doughy deer. Oh, this is horrible. This is the most awful Beatles sketch you've ever done, making the poor Beatles fight. Why would you want to see them fight? You're awful. There's something wrong with you. Making the peaceful Beatles thunder punching each other's taint. Oh. That's awful. Oh, God, there's something wrong with you. There'll always be something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you.